My name is John D. Anderson. Spell it John. D is initial. Anderson, Anderson. My birth date is 8/26/17. I grew up in the Midwest as a youngster. My folks had a farm-ranch combination, and we were proficient in horsemanship, driving cattle, and agricultural pursuits. And then I moved out to my grandfather's ranch, where I did a lot of cowboying, as it were. Incidentally, I was born at Verona, North Dakota, in 8/26/17 on the Grandpa Stokes Ranch. So I do have a background in agriculture.
How'd you come to join the Navy?
Well, I moved back to my dad. My dad was a judge in Minnesota, in Morehead's side of the river, Red River, in Minnesota. And we were three boys growing up at the time, my twin and I, and my brother Roy. And we were all graduates of a high school, Dilworth High School. We wanted to go to college. I wanted to go to Minnesota University. And my dad said, well, look, you guys have got to get a job to help us put you through school, because I financially can't carry this on all the way. And so I thought about this a little while, and at that time, you couldn't get a job just like it is in today's world. And so I decided I'd go in the military and get my education there, because they always spoke about that in their drafting procedures and so on, of what was the benefit of a military career. And so I believed him. My twin, he also went with me, but first of all, he went to the Marine Corps. He said he was going to the Marine Corps. And after some concentration on that, he wanted to fly, in Marine Corps planes. He had something wrong with depth perception. So they had to cancel him out, so he came back to the Navy too. And he followed me into the training station at Great Lakes, Illinois. I was there in March and he was there in July. And so by the time I was about to leave out for sea service, he was just about coming into his experience of doing the same thing. Boot camp, in other words. When I left the boot camp, they sent me to Seattle, Washington, to Bremerton Navy Yard, and sent me to the carrier. I forgot the name of the carrier. Well, first, put it this way: they sent me to a carrier.
Say the sentence again and just end with, and then he sent you to a carrier. You came from somewhere.
I came from the boot camp to Seattle and Bremerton Navy Yard, and I was assigned to an aircraft carrier. But they had too many men on board, all seamen or apprentice seamen, and the Arizona needed help. So they transferred me over to the Arizona in Seattle. And then I rode this Arizona for about 5 months in Pacific maneuvers and learning seamanship and all the various and sundry things you have to know as a seaman. And finally, the word came out that they needed somebody to act as guards on the Burma Road in Burma, Lashio, Burma to Kunming, China. So I volunteered for that, but they had too many guys volunteered for that. So then I said, well, I'll volunteer for something else. So they asked me if I would go into the Asiatic station in the Asiatic fleet. And I said, well, that's okay if it's with me, if it's all right with them. So they transferred me there. So I wound up in the Asiatic fleet, maintaining, shall we say, air aid and help to Americans who were stranded out there. And they formed us into landing forces. And I was in the landing force, first squad emergency landing force, off the destroyer Ellet. And we worked from Shanhaikuan in North China, where the Great Wall of China starts, all along the sea coast, all the way south to Vietnam. And we chased Chinese pirates up and down the China seas to keep them from taking people hostage on ships and planes that were working in the area. And of all nations, most of the nations had this type of activity. The French, the Germans, the Italians, Americans, and British all worked together to keep the seas clear of harm. And of course, we had to chase some of these pilots, muggers, I call them mugs, up to a place called Fuchao in South China. And that's where we engaged in a real firefight. But we disposed of that, and they called us the Yangtze Patrol. And so whenever they needed help, they called it the Yangtze Patrol. And the 4th Marines were stationed at Shanghai, but that was too big a country for a regiment of Marines to cover from all the various people who did business out there. So we filled in the blanks, so to speak, and covered these areas that were hard to reach. And then they sent us down to the southern Philippines because the Moros were acting up. And Moros have been constant pain in the Philippine Army's areas. They're people like the Muslims are today that we know about. They cut people's heads off for no reason at all, and they sent us down there to pacify them. And we went into Zamboanga, and the Moros down there looked at us suspiciously because we were carrying weapons, and we would use them if we needed to. And all the guys in the Yangtze Patrol at that time were guys you see in Green Berets and SEAL teams and stuff like that today. And we didn't have that training those guys had, but we did what became necessary, underwater demolition, things like that. And then we raided some various places down there to make sure that they didn't come back again. And then we left the Moros alone, and they were pretty nice people after we left, and they even wanted to play us a baseball game. And so we did. We actually chose sides and played baseball with the Moros, which amazed me because I didn't think Moros or people out there ever knew anything about baseball. But they did. And they knew who Babe Ruth was. I thought that was funny. And so, incidentally, one of the guys was on our team was a red-haired fella. His name was, see, here I'm again. I've lost the name.
Was he later a celebrity or a sports?
He's later a celebrity.
Like Red Skelton or?
Well, he had red hair. His name, he wasn't Skelton. He was in From Here to Eternity, The Wackiest Ship in the Army on NBC. He was one of those guys. And he was a great athlete, great athlete. What is Red's last name? I was afraid it was going to happen.
Was he a leading man?
He was one of these people who who are standards that you need to flesh out a cast. You know, you got to have the good guy, the bad guy. Yeah, he was.
And did he do several romantic movies with, what's her name, who later did the diaper commercials? I can't think of his name.
Mickey Rooney.
Oh, I remember his name now.
Okay.
This redheaded
Larry.
this redheaded fellow's name is Red. I forgot his first name. Red Lebselter, but he had a stage name that he used that we saw him on in TV and stuff. From Here to Eternity, he was one of the top stars in that show. I'll probably anyway. I'm going to have to go past that because I can't think about it.
Let's get up to Pearl Harbor.
Oh, well. Anyway, let me start from here.
Okay.
I spent 3 years in the China Station. I was in Vietnam, in Burma, where Merrill's Marauders were. And while we were out there, we had this famous general with the Air Force was out there with the Chinese Air Force in China. Stopping again. And anyway, after 3 years, I was sent back to Pearl Harbor. And they sent me to the destroyer Ellet. And while I was on the destroyer Ellet, we came into Pearl Harbor after some maneuvers out in the Pacific, which had to do with keeping us out of war with anybody else. And we were out there for a while. We came into Pearl, and we took a buoy in West Lock at Pearl Harbor. And while we were over there and tying up, the chief warrant boatswain off the Arizona, which was then parked buoy in the Battleship Row. His name was Boatswain Sanders. Boatswain Sanders came over to visit with the chief boatswain mate on board the Ellet. And I was working with the chief boatswain mate there, and he said, Boatswain Sanders said, Andy, what are you doing here? And I said, well, they assigned me here from China. And he said, well, that's funny, you belong on the Arizona. I said, I do? He said, yes, you do. I said, wait a minute, you're talking about my twin brother. He says, you're the twin? I said, yes. He says, then no wonder I got you was mistaken. He said, would you like to come back to the Arizona? And I said, yes. My twin's over there, that's okay, that's all right with me. And Boatswain Gompers on the Ellet said, well, that was all right with him too. So they arranged a transfer for me from the Ellet to the Arizona. So that's how I got on the Arizona before Pearl Harbor. And I was on there from, I think it was June through December, of course. And that's when we did a lot of battle maneuvers, battle force out in the Lahaina roads around the Hawaiian Islands, and looked for who was this lady aviator who went down, who was doing a round the world tour, and our fleet went looking for her. We never did find her. Of course, nobody ever found her. And we got back into Pearl Harbor Friday night, and we started dismantling the guns and taking the ammunition down below because the folks in Hawaii didn't like to have those big guns with ammunition handy, where somebody who was not a nice guy might trigger a round off and hit them, and they landed in Honolulu or some other place where civilians might be. So the ammunition goes into the magazines away, and the magazines are locked, guns are just taken apart. And so the morning of December 7th, that's the way we were. And most of the ships were in the same situation because that was the rules of the engagement that they had at that time. Peacetime engagement in a wartime atmosphere. And that was the bad thing about our Navy. Had a good Navy, good sailors, good weapons. But when you got them locked up and you need them and you can't, nobody's got the key, and all the time you're being shot at or bombed or something, and you're trying to do something about it, put the fires out and save the wounded and the dead. That's was Pearl Harbor to start with, December 7th. And me, myself, I stood in ankle deep in blood.
Can you start that morning, you woke up that morning, and start from there?
Well, when I woke up that morning,
When you woke up on December 7th?
I got up pretty early because I had the duty.
I mean, would you start the sentence of when I woke up on the morning of December 7th?
When I awoke on the morning of December 7th, I had the duty in the 4th Division. And the division was clean up any activity that we had going and to arrange the ceremonies for our church on the fan tail of the ship. So I took my working party and we commenced to do all this sort of thing. And we were a little late getting into the mess hall for breakfast. So we got this straightened out and we went inside to eat. And about the time I got inside to get a chance to eat something, I heard a loud explosion. And I thought, what the dickens is that? And then one of the mess cooks looked out the porthole and saw the explosion and called me. And he said, Andy, you were in China just recently. Well, yes. Well, you know what it was? Did you see that? And I said, no. He said, get out here and take a look. So I went outside the hatch onto the main quarterdeck, looked up and saw this plane dipping like this. And it had red balls on its wings. And I said, I did said a cuss word, and I said, the Japanese are here. We already knew this was going to happen sometime, but they're here. And so I ran back toward the hatch door to pull the general alarm. And about the time I got to pull it, which I never did, a bomb dropped between us and the Vestal. And it blew me inside the hatch, knocked me silly. And I, of course, that set off the wildfire. And of course, the Japanese were then machine gunning the decks, like spraying the decks with machine gun fire. Then more bombs began to drop around us. And of course, we immediately did what we were supposed to do, go to our general quarters station. So I got up off the deck, went down to the lower hatches and back up into the barbette of number 4 turret, because I was a gunner on my battle station in number 4 turret. And I got into the seat and said, manned and ready. In the meantime, I told the turret captain, Campbell, I said, look, what I saw out there was a number of Japanese planes. I didn't see any ships or anything, and no shell fire. There's all bombs and machine gun fire. And he said, well, what do you suggest? And I said, well, we can't do any good in here. We need some gunners on the anti-aircraft batteries. And if those guys are dead, who's going to defend us from those planes up there? And he says, well, what do you want to do? And I said, I'd like to get out there and get on a gun with my brother. He's an anti-aircraft gun captain, and he needs help. And he said, go for it. So I said, okay. So I talked to a couple other guys that was in there with me, Hog Otterman and Dwayne Barth and a fellow named Lewis and several other guys. I said, I'm going out the trap door and I'm going up there and get on the guns. If you guys want to stay here, you can do that and man this turret. If they start shelling us, I'll come back. So I won't be gone that long. So I got out of the turret, went out from the overhang of the turret, and started up the ladder to the boat deck where all the anti-aircraft guns were. Well, I got to the top of the ladder, and the enormous explosion occurred, and people were just blown all over the place. There was all kinds of body parts, different. There was nothing I could do to do it for anything, and a tremendous fire broke out. Then explosions of our artillery that was up there, our ammunition started blowing, and knocked me back as far as number 4 turret. And on the way back, I grabbed a guy by the hand who was on fire, and I held on to him. And he was from Greenfield, Ohio. I never forgot that. And I saved him. I got him out of there. But he was on fire. I got the fire out. And then, of course, there's nothing I could do because everybody was trying to salvage somebody or get them off where they were free and clear. But nobody was free and clear. And some small craft were around us, but they didn't venture too close. But one of them did. And Admiral Fuqua, who was the senior surviving officer there on board, was yelling at me to get in one of those boats. And when I was dumping wounded people that I could find, who were still in one piece, into the boat to take them ashore to the bunker over there on Ford Island. And so he yelling at me to get off. Yeah, I said, Mike, I'm not leaving. My brother's there someplace. I got to find him. I got to find him. And he says, he can't make it. He couldn't have made it. You just get in there. He said, this place is going to blow. That magazine under you was almost hit by one. And he said, it's liable to go. He says, get out of here. But I wouldn't go. Well, he gave me a big shove. In the meantime, one of the bombs hit the turret that we had been in. And it skidded off the faceplate, which is about 16-inch steel, the faceplate, and went down below and exploded below and killed members of the CIC, Combat Information Center. But we weren't there at the time. We were looking for a different spot on the ship there. And so finally, I got over there to the starboard quarter, which is the right-hand quarter of the ship, where that small boat had got in. And a fellow named Alexander was a pilot of this small craft, which I didn't think I'd ever forget, and I didn't this time. And Alexander said, come on, give me the guy, as he did. And I said, no. He said, you got any more? And he said, yes. He said, well, get him in here, let's get him on. In the meantime, Admiral Fuqua, who was the lieutenant commander at that time, came over to me and says, you got to get in the boat. We want to save as many men as we can. Get in there. I said, well, I'm not going. He says, yes, you are. And he shoved me in with a wounded man in my hands. So I got in the boat, whether I wanted to or not, and they took off for Ford Island. I got to Ford Island. We unloaded the dead and wounded on some flatbed trucks that came down there to get them. And then I stood outside the bunker and I looked out there at the Arizona and I said, it's still on fire, but maybe we can get back and do something. There's a small craft floating by itself, nobody in it. And I turned around and saw this kid standing next to me and I said, Rose, are you ready to drive back out there and go at it again? He says, if you are, I am. So we swam out, got in that boat, which is just adrift of the Arizona stern, and drove back up alongside the port quarter of the Arizona. That's the left side. And I climbed aboard, he held us alongside, and we did rescue 3 guys. They were alive. We had so many dead ones that I couldn't tell. In the time that I had, I couldn't have, and other guys were trying to do the same thing, but they must have gone by the time we got back. And I had to take what we could get. So we took these 3 guys and tried to make sure they were okay, and we drove on down. I was a pilot of this small craft, drove on down past the Oklahoma and the West Virginia, and we got down to the seaplane ramp, and a shell or something hit our boat. And it could have been an explosive machine gun fire, explosive bullets. Anyway, it blew our boat apart and lost those 3 guys and Rose. And I was the only one living alive in that. And I swam around there, and the oil was on fire too, by the way, from the exploded oil tanks. I swam around in this splashing water, trying to duck planes when they were firing on us. And there was other people out there in the water too besides me. And I tried to find these guys we had and get them ashore to Ford Island. But I ran out of gas. I just couldn't do it anymore. So I managed to make it ashore and just fell down on the ground there on the beach. And the Japanese were still running back and forth. A new batch of them from up there came in. It's like second wave, I think. But anyway, they peppered the beach with machine gun fire. And of course, I had to get off the beach before I got hit myself again. And I ran up to the runway, which is on Ford Island, not too far from the beach. And there was a tree and several trees there, and one of them had a 19.3 Springfield rifle and 2 bandoliers of ammunition hanging over the limb there. I thought, my God, this is what's saving me. I've got myself a rifle and 2 bandoliers of ammunition, and that's about 215 rounds, and I'm going to be able to do some good. I took off down the runway and found a bomb hole in the runway and parked there. And got in there, and of course, for some reason or other, they didn't come back and bomb us again. They were down there blowing up the planes a little further away from us. And so a little while later, another guy named, what was his name? Anyway, this other fellow come on, he was in Marine uniform, dress uniform, and he looked at me and he said, "Hey, Andy, what are you doing there?" And I said, "Well, that's where I'm going to make my stand." He says, "Well, I've got a machine gun. We can give them hell." I said, "Okay, park with me and we'll write it out, make our stand here." So he parked in there. Of course, the Enterprise was offshore about, I don't know, maybe 200 miles or so, and their planes were coming in to land. I guess they weren't aware that it was happening at Pearl. And so they came in trying to land. This was getting dark. And so we didn't know who these people were, whether they were enemy coming back for another run at us or what. Well, my 19.3 Springfield wasn't very good against nighttime pilots and planes. So I didn't do so good with that. And my friend, who later became a sheriff in Georgia, Valdosta, Georgia, Walt Gaskins, that was his name. I couldn't think of his name when I was talking about him. Walt Gaskins. Walt survived the war and went to be a sheriff in Valdosta, Georgia. And but in the meantime, the next morning, we stayed there all night. The next morning, the word came out, the Marines spread a squad out all over looking for fellows who had been hurt, but nobody knew about it. They wanted to find them and pick up the casualties and get the guys back to their own ship if they still could make it. And so they came on to me and Gaskins and told us to report to 1010 Dock, which was across from the Ford Island on the mainland of Honolulu or Pearl. And we went over there and found out there was about maybe 200 guys, all walking wounded Arizona survivors on 1010 Dock. This man's name was Commander Geiselman. He was a survivor of the Arizona, but he wasn't on the ship when the bombing took place. He'd been ashore, but he'd gone out as close as he could to do some good. And so he organized us all together, found out who needed to go to the hospital and needed to be wrapped up right there with first aid, and to get something to eat, some water, because everybody was dry as a bone, nobody had any water, and volunteer for hazardous duty. So I wanted to stay with the Arizona crowd of survivors and man a ship ourselves. But Captain Geiselman, or Commander Geiselman said, "No, you can't do that. We got to flesh out the ships who've lost men and they need replacements. And you guys are trained sailors and you're all good at it, and you got to fill out the blanks. So we got to get the ships to sea right now. We got to get a fleet out there to battle the Japanese." And when it came around to me, I said, "I'll volunteer, I'll go." And they said, "Okay." So they sent me to a destroyer, the McDonough. And the McDonough had a landing force, which I'd been doing in China in another destroyer. So I fought from Pearl Harbor on all the way across the Pacific, and so many scrapes and fights that I even forgot the names of the places. But we did raid New Guinea, 2 or 3 places, Hollandia, Salamaua and Lae, and New Guinea, and landed at Guadalcanal with the 1st Marine Division. And then we landed at we raided Truk. And all of these raids were pretty dangerous business. And
John, Tell us what you know about what happened to your brother, and give us his name.
I got it. I didn't know what happened to my brother. I was out in the Pacific and found out that there was a gunner that was on the boat deck who had charge of all those guns up there, and my brother was under his command. And he said that he saw, he put out a brief that he saw Anderson knocked down by gunfire. He was a gun captain on a gun. And then when the explosion occurred, the gunner got blown overboard. So he didn't know what happened other than most people up there were burned to death or blown to pieces. So they never did find my brother's body. But the last what I know about is what this gunner had to say later. And the gunner, of course, was killed after he had done this against the kamikazes off the sea off Okinawa when the kamikazes were coming in on the Pacific Fleet units. The gunner was out there and was killed there. So that was the last anybody ever had on my brother.
So it's safe to assume that he's with the others who didn't make it at the Arizona in the bottom of Pearl Harbor.
That's right.
I need you to say that.
So as we get back to, I don't know if you want to hear war stories or not, but the Elliott was almost sunk in the battles in the Aleutian Islands, and I was on board then, and we got towed back to San Francisco, 45 days under tow, and being dogged by Japanese submarines trying to sink us. But we got into San Francisco Bay and wound up at Mare Island Navy Yard. Repaired, went back to sea again. And after that, we made places like Tarawa, like I say, Saipan and Tinian. We made the landings in Tinian, made the landing in Guam, made the landing in Buckner Bay in Okinawa, which is named after General Buckner, who was killed there. And basically, I can't even remember all the others, Villa La Vella, Kilimanjaro.
How did you get from leaving the Navy to settling in Roswell, New Mexico, and going into broadcasting? Tell Larry.
Well, I was discharged from the United States Navy at Camp Elliott, California. That's a Marine base. We'd been with the Marines. And I was walking down the street in uniform in Los Angeles. I come up from San Pedro. And I walked past on the street past this saloon. And as I went by, somebody came running out the door and grabbed me by the arm. And he said, "Hey, are you out of the service?" And I said, "Yeah." He says, "You just got out?" I said, "Yeah, I just left Camp Elliott. They discharged me." "Oh." "Well," he said, "I could use a big guy like you." "Well, doing what?" "You want to work in a movie?" I says, "Hey, I don't know anything about movies. I'm not a movie star." He said, "Well, wait a minute. I'm not going to make you a movie star right now." He said, "All I want to know is, would you like a job in the movies?" I said, "I can't believe this." I said, "You're kidding me." He said, "I'm not kidding you. My name is Steve Brody, and I am the business agent of the IATSE, if you know what that is." Okay. And I said, "You are, huh?" I said, about 2 weeks ago, I was shooting at guys or knocking the teeth out if I didn't like them. And I don't know if I'll like you. I think there's something strange going on here. You don't know me from Adam. How do you know what I can do or can't do?" He says, "Well, I like your guts." But he said, "Listen, here's my card." He wrote a name, Mr. Brown. See Mr. Brown at RKO Pictures. And I said, "Okay." And he says, go down to United Artists, which is down the street there, about a couple of miles away. And he said, there's some people there who'll be glad to see you. We need you. And he says, yes. And he says, I want you to go get a place to stay, and here's $500 to buy some clothes. You get out of the uniform, and then if we ever need you in uniform, you have a uniform, okay? Yeah, fine. So I said, I can't believe this. This guy's giving me $500 good dollars, and he don't know me from Adam. So I went and got a place to stay, and on the way down there to stay, I stopped at this place on Melrose Avenue, and which was not too far from the movie studios. And I walk upstairs, and the lady there takes me around, shows me one of the apartments, and out of one of the apartments comes Louis Costa. I served with him in Guadalcanal. He was a Marine, Master Sergeant, an old Marine, and I helped Louis Costa come out of the Marine Corps without getting killed. But anyway, here he is. He's married, and he's working at Paramount Pictures. And he says, what are you doing here, Andy? I said, well, somebody grabbed me off the street, a guy named Steve Brody. He said, oh, yeah, I know him. He's IATSE. I said, well, what about him? He said, well, he's union. I said, well, is that okay? He said, well, you got to belong to the union. I said, I don't know. Nobody said anything about a union. So he said, well, you go out there and follow the instructions they gave you, and you'll be okay. So I did. And Louis got a silver star and wanted to give it to me while I was standing there, and he had it on a little frame, and he said, this was yours, John. I said, no, it wasn't. They didn't give it to me. They gave it to you. But anyway, I wound up down at the United Artists, and the guard there wouldn't let me in, and so I was about to turn around and go away, and then I thought better about it, and I thought I'd take him out and wring his neck a little bit, because he was nasty to me. Because they think everybody came to the gate is a bad guy, or looking for a favor, or looking for some way to do somebody something. So I was going to give him a little lesson. But this man showed up I was supposed to meet, and he said to me, my God, you finally made it. I said, yeah, I did, but he wouldn't let me in. So then he gave this man who was running the studio at United Artists, gave this guy a tongue lashing who would let me in. And so I got in. Well, it was a free ride, but he didn't know it. So then I got out there, and they sent me to a studio, to drama school. I'm working, but I'm going to a drama school at different hours. And I was there with Robert Mitchum at the drama school, and Jane Greer was a girl there, and she was a pretty good actress. And there's a number of others, and I've forgotten. Judith, what is her name? But anyway, they had a movie going, and they had somebody to drop off the church steeple and take a fall off a church steeple. The Stranger was the name of the movie. And it had Orson Welles in it, the star. Edward G. Robinson was in it. Who was the lady? The lady was a beautiful lady, and a very nice person, who, looked out for the folks who didn't have enough smarts or ability to be actors. And I wasn't an actor, and I knew it. And so I was glad to jump out of a church steeple, which I did do, and a couple other things, And in the meantime, some of the drama school sound got on tape. And so when they viewed the tape, they called me in and talked to me. They said, you're not a movie actor star type, John, but you got a good voice. And he said, you ought to be interested in some radio broadcasting. Oh, yeah? Yeah. We can get you on a radio if you want to. Try it and see what you think. Well, see, I'd gone to night school all this time, say, afterward. 2 years in night school, Martin School of Science, where I studied a lot of things, including meteorology. And so this gentleman came from Roswell, New Mexico to Los Angeles, to the Martin School and a few other places to see if he could find some people who would fit in at Portales, New Mexico's Eastern New Mexico University. And they were going to put a radio station in there, and they asked me if I would come and do it. And I said, well, yeah, I'll do it. So I came down to Portales, New Mexico, to the university, stayed with Dr. Golden, the president of the university over there, and we got this thing going. And the station was built there, and I became part of it, doing broadcast work. And then I was there about 3 months after we got off.
You were there about 3 months.
Yeah.
Your hair got mussed, and if I may try and get it back down, the wind was making it stick up.
Are we,
Continue.
okay?
You were there 3 months.
Should I start with that? I was there 3 months, and I got a call from John Montgomery, who owned KSWS Radio in Roswell, New Mexico. Would you come down here and let's see if we can't get you on a pretty good commercial station? I said, well, that sounds like a good idea. I found out then that Bill Merritt and Paul McAvoy were the other owners. And so they all liked me, so they gave me a stint of time on the air doing a broadcast a run of 4 hours or something like that. But we had to learn to do a lot of other things. We had to go out and get newsworthy items for the newscasts. We also had to be pretty good at reading news, which we were. And incidentally, George Walsh was one of the great ones who was working at KSWS at the time. Max Sent was another one. George, by the way, wound up in CBS in Hollywood, where I'd left, and introduced what was the Dodge City movie with who was Matt Dillon? What was that? What was that?
James Arnett.
Yeah, James Arnett and Matt Dillon, and they had an introductory to the program, and George Walsh did all the announcing on it, and that's how he went from there. I don't know whatever he did from there on. And we had 2 or 3 other fellows who worked on KSWS at that time, who had left and went on to better things or bigger things. That is, bigger audiences and better, I won't say better audiences, bigger audiences. So I did this programming, and they asked me to do some weathercasts and some other stuff, which had to do with Western music. And of course, I knew Western songs and things like that, so I was pretty familiar with the agricultural end of it, and could do these farm and home hour type stuff, and also shoot the breeze, talk to folks, get some young folks who wanted to become Western singers and had little bands, and brought them on board. We put them on board on Sagebrush Serenade. And of course, I had to have some kind of a handle, but I brought that with me from California, Cactus Jack. So they liked that. So we used that as a nom de plume. And I did the work of disc jockey and Western music and hillbilly. And of course, I liked all the hillbilly stuff. And it was nothing that I didn't like about it. I even played the piano in front of the curtain while the band was playing behind the curtain, and nobody knew it. And they thought I was doing it. And then I did a couple other things. I did Uncle Vitamin for a kiddie show. Oh, it was a clown show, dressed up as a clown, and gave away a lot of prizes and things that different companies gave to us to give to the kids to entertain them. And some of the young folks come up there, and it was their first experience on TV, and they had a chance to get a little prize too if it worked out so well and they knew the answers. And so I enjoyed doing that. And shortly after I'd been there, I won't say shortly, a few years, Mr. Barnett came in to the picture. He's going to put a TV station on, and he wanted me to join them, and I said okay, and stay with the KSWS radio and TV. So we did, and or I did, and he wanted to put on, when he got the station out of the air, he wanted to have a weather broadcast, which he knew from my resume that I had a background in it. I had seamen, and the sailors look at it, and out of the bookwork in the bookstores, and of course the teachings of a college in weather. So anyway, I did put on a show, and he said to use your own judgments, and had a lot of suggestions. And Mr. Barnett was a very fair man and a very decent man. And he's a great big tall fellow, about 6'6", and very strict. Other than that, he was easy to work for. And so I proceeded to do weathercasts on TV for a long time, something like 20 years. And that was before we had all the modern
When did
miracles.
the TV station go on the air?
How's that, sir?
When did the TV station go on the air?
1954, I believe it was.
Tell Larry that.
Oh, we went on the air with KSWS TV in 1954, and until it was sold later on, and years later, and had different owners by that time. And so I retired from the radio. In the meantime, I might add that military career still continued because I had some leftover activity that I had guaranteed I would do, and I was a sitter. They had people like me who had joined that they'd got into join the reserve. They'd have to do nothing, but they were a sitter to be called in case a nuclear war broke out. So during the Cold War, I was one of those who had a assignment already made. If the nuclear war broke out, I was to go. And I wasn't to tell anybody about it, and I didn't, except the owner, John Barnett, knew. So if I left, he knew why. I'd have my job back if there was a place to come back to.
Okay, how did you become the TV Cactus Jack? Tell Larry.
Well, it sort of carried over, Cactus Jack and the TV. There was another fellow who was real gun happy. His name was Sheriff Norm. I happened to have, where I lived here in town, I happened to have a black a quarter horse stallion, and a little dog, and a bunch of quacker ducks for company, because I wasn't married. And we used to have people come up and want to know if they could play a few tunes in the station's engineering department, and put on a little show there for the people in radio, and they could film some of it and put it on the TV tube. So that's how that happened. And so we had people like Hank Snow and Hank Thompson, and gosh, I can't even remember all the names of the Western singers who came by. All came by, show us what they could do, sing a record, and records would be played, and we would play the records to give them a chance. And Elvis Presley was one of them who came by. Hound Dog was his record. That was his big one.
Tell us about that day. Elvis walked into KSW.
Yes, with a record called...
Tell Larry.
Well, Elvis Presley walked in. He was a backup man or doing the warm-ups for Hank Snow, And Hank Snow was going to be here at the Pueblo Auditorium in Roswell on some special day, I forget the day. And Elvis was an unknown quantity. So he's doing the warm-ups, but he was good at what he did. And he came into the station, which was at 4th and Richardson at that time, and I was over there. And he got to talking to me, and he told me he had a record, and would I like to listen to it? And I said, sure. So we played it, and I said, you know, that's pretty good. That's a lot different than some of these things. This is a breakout from just regular country-style music. This has got some speed up to it, some zip to it. And I said, you know, I think maybe you got something here. And he said, would you play it on the air? I said, sure. So I threw on the turntable and went on the air. And Elvis Presley worked on the air on KSWS TV, radio at the time. And it was pretty well liked. And the kids, they just thronged around the station to see him. And he went on down to Pueblo Auditorium, invited me down, so I did. And I found out that Hank Snow was the big kahana in this particular show, and Elvis was the second banana. But anyway, of course, he went on some of these famous network shows, and, you know, it goes from there.
So what was the record you played?
Hound Dog. That was the
Always
first one.
tell Larry, anything I ask you, tell Larry.
Yeah.
Okay.
Then we tell him again?
Yeah.
The record that Elvis brought with him was Hound Dog. And I guess he was distributing them around because he gave me one and asked me to play it, and I did. And I said, you've got yourself a winner, I think.
Did you have him sign it?
Well, no, it didn't. He was still kind of unknown.
Okay. We're going to get into these pictures now. So
Okay.
So Larry, show the camera the first picture. Okay. Now put it under your chin so John can see it. Now tell me about this picture.
This is a picture of a weather phenomena going on at the time. I'm sitting at a desk in the studio.
Oh, you know what? Stop it right there because I have to change the.
So tell me about this picture here, John.
Show it to the camera first.
Okay.
To your right a little bit. There you go. Now ask you. Now.
Okay, John, tell me about this picture.
Well, the picture is a weather map, which is a fall weather map, by the way. It has a low center with a lot of raindrops on it, and this is something we made up to produce our weather show for that particular day. And here I am at this disc giving a resume of the weather that day as it appeared on the charts that I had made up earlier. And I used charts that I got from the United States Weather Service and placed them on a map that you see here.
Okay, next picture. Show it to the camera. Okay. And hold it high, Larry, up against your chin so it doesn't line it too low.
Well, the people you see here are, what to begin with, is Dave Brown. They're reviewing some film that had been shot earlier to be used on the TV station. And I can't recall the name of the fellows here, except the fellow in the striped shirt is Dave Brown, who was a newscaster on KSWS.
Next picture. Okay.
Okay, who's that, John?
Oh, that's me. The fellow you see here is a Chief Boatswain's Mate, United States Navy. And I was on board a destroyer at the time, and some kind of a mission that we were on at the time. The picture taken by a Navy photographer.
About what time?
Well,
Before or after Pearl Harbor?
oh, this is after Pearl Harbor. Yeah.
Would be-
See, before Pearl Harbor, I was a second class.
Tell Larry everything.
Before Pearl Harbor, I was a second-class boatswain's mate. By the time 3 years of war had come along and I passed by, I was a chief boatswain's mate myself. And I was a chief in the pictures that you're looking at.
Next picture. Show the camera. Okay. Left or right?
And we're looking at a picture of Dave Brown again, and his partner, and me, John Anderson, on the right. And it was just for advertisements.
And which one is Dave Brown?
The first one, the guy in the light coat
On the left?
on the left.
Next picture.
Hmm.
Okay.
The picture at the top is where the United States Weather Bureau people awarded me the Wessant Medal for meteorology, which is 1 in 50 ever gets on meteorologists. And apparently I earned it because they gave it to me.
Tell her everything.
Apparently I earned it because they gave me the medal, and I was quite amazed that they even bothered with small town TV, which we were at that time. But they said that I had deserved it.
And about the other pictures on there?
The other pictures I'm not familiar with.
Okay. Next picture. All righty.
Well, here's our news department up at the top at the desk with yours truly on board, and the other two people I can't tell from here who they are. And me, I'm over to one side in a brown jacket. And down below we have me. On the left-hand corner we have me and Frank Tracy and Dana. And that's about it as I can remember.
Okay, but what were you guys doing at that time?
Oh, you mean, and when the picture was going on?
Yeah, what does it represent? What memories do you have with those pictures?
Well, we got lined up to take a picture for the newscasts or something they were putting on in the newspaper or something like that. That's our reason for these pictures. And of course, some of them they just took the pictures and gave them to us for our own purposes.
When you see yourself in various positions around the station,
Mm-hmm.
does it bring back any memory, any interesting story you can tell us about what your duties was at the time?
Well, we did commercials too. All of our people did commercials in between their news or weather or what show they were doing. And I can recall doing one where our advertiser was advertising a beer. I can't give you the brand name. And their director said, pick up the glass, tell them how great a beer it is, and then do this. Okay, so I did that. And did all, you know what, broke loose. Immediately, the phone rang, and all the folks in Roswell thought I was a drunk, and I was a person who drank beer, and I was going to make trouble for all the young folks coming up for me drinking beer on the air. I never drank this stuff. All I did was do like this and put it down. And they thought I drank it. And they said they caused a lot of trouble with Mr. Barnett, and finally he said, John, you don't have to do any more of those commercials. Not like that, because it made it look as though I was doing this.
You flubbed a couple of commercials on the air, tell me.
That's one of them.
Talk to me later.
Now, another commercial I flubbed was a tire company was selling tires. And I had memorized my little gig, and I was supposed to be advertising Richfield, was it Goodrich? I was supposed to be advertising Goodrich tires, and I said something else, good something. There was another kind. Goodyear. I got them mixed up, and I'm rattling away there, mixed up, gave the wrong one. I rattled through the commercial, got to Goodyear, and said Goodrich, and went on down. And the folks over at the plant where they sell these tires was a little upset about that, because they paid for a commercial for their tire. But they passed me by and said, well, you have too many things to memorize. That's too hard to remember all that. So that's what I said. I had to take it. I did make a mistake.
Okay, next picture. The tower. And then, is that just the transmitter location?
Yeah, this is the transmitter location of KSWS TV. Now, this was a tower on Comanche Hill, if I remember right. And it's about, I think it was about 1,000 feet tall. And being 1,000 feet tall, it had a lot of coaxial cable that ran up and down inside the framework. These coaxial cable had a tendency to get hit by lightning. So we had to climb up this tower and change the coaxial sections. They were 20 foot long and about 10 inches in diameter pipes with a regular type cable going down the middle all the way to the antenna on the top of the tower. And so we had to change those things. And then whenever that happened. And also, a week before the tower went down, we were up changing lights and coaxial cable. And I watched those stays. There's stays that run from the ground way out up to the top of the tower someplace and secured to the tower. And these things were supposed to be taut, but with a little slack so the thing would rock a little but won't break. Not too rigid, so they'd break. And this would keep that tower standing straight up. Well, ice storm came along and messed up the whole mess and caused it to tumble. And a week before that, we were up there, me and a fellow named Audie Murphy were on the tower, and we luckily got down off of there before it went over. That was about a week before that.
So how does an on-air guy like you go out and climb the tower? Is that what you did in those days?
Yeah, you did everything. You did everything. That's what you did. No, that's a picture of the tall tower. There, you got it there. Roswell first.
Okay, next picture. All right, we've already really covered that.
Okay.
Next picture. Okay.
And here's this chief engineer, Ray Summers ago. They're working on some camera work there that needs to be fixed, he and his assistant. And they kept the cameras running for KSLES for a long time.
Okay. Next picture. That group. Left to right.
I'm looking at some of these people to see if I know them. Yes, I know some of them. The first one is Ray Summerskill, the man you saw in a previous picture. And these other people, I
Okay.
can't recall their names.
Next picture. That's just generic, what is that, the audio board? Or is that a...
Yeah, that's the board, the keyboard that they use in the studio. They
the
play
on-air
the,
switcher?
how's that?
The on-air switcher?
Yes, it's a switcher. Now, in this case, this happens to be a radio switcher. Well, no, it doesn't either. It does have the picture on it. It was a regular TV switcher that they used at that time. And you'll see all these buttons the guy has to punch to keep things rolling.
Next picture. Is that a wider picture of what we just saw?
Well, that's another one for the switchers. These are all switchers in here. For television.
Okay, next picture.
Okay.
What was that, a promotion?
Well, this was a newspaper ad that came out of the Roswell Daily Record when John Barnett got all of us together, got our pictures made, and put in the newspaper to give the folks in the Pecos Valley their first look at what TV would be looking like when these people were in front of a camera and doing their thing for the people here of this area. John Barnett's picture is right in the top middle. He was the owner. Some of the guys I recognize but can't think of their names.
Yeah, their names are on there, but this was just as the first TV signal was coming on the air?
That's right.
So you were there when they turned on the TV part.
I was there.
Can you give us a little story about the day they turned it on?
Well, I think we were only on the air for about 2 hours the first day to make sure everything worked and be sure to get the ball games. And this was one of the things that everybody wanted to see was Major League Baseball. And they wanted to see the World Series. I remember this. And so everybody was just hustling around there trying to make sure that every wire was in the right place. Everything worked out like it's supposed to be. And the scoop, wherever that was located, where they bounced the signal off of, and they came back to us, so we could put it broadcast over the air. This had to be sure it was just exactly lined up right. And of course, the engineers were just frantic to make sure it would work. And mostly it was a very, very, very tense situation to get that thing just exactly right. And we had a few fumbles on that, but it finally got it so it straightened out. And,
Okay, do you remember what day that was?
no, I do not.
Okay.
That's
Next
okay.
picture. That's just a general TV ad, right?
Yeah.
All right, next picture.
Just a second. Went too far. How come it won't go back?
Go to the right, just keep going right. Switch left.
Switch left?
Left.
Okay.
Yeah, keep going. Catch up. I know, we're trying to wrap this up.
Yeah.
Okay. Switchers, there's the ad.
And that was just that was the card that was shown, that was your test pattern, right?
Yeah, that's the test pattern. NBC's test pattern. We were affiliated with NBC at that time.
And did you have live bands like the Blakely?
We had the Blakely Band. We had a number of bands of local artists who were, I would say, very good at what they did. Excellent.
Next picture. That's the building.
Hmm. And this is the front of this magnificent brownstone structure that was created by a lot of different people. For instance, Mr. Barnett, when he came here, he had to play in his own mind a television studio that everybody could enjoy and go to and see and be proud of. And so he asked for input from all of us who had been in some place where we had some chance for input. In my case, he thought that I had a little input in the staging because I'd worked on television and also motion pictures in Hollywood. I was not a very good actor, as I said, but anyway. So I put in my feelings about how it ought to be done, and everybody who worked there had a little point to make, how it should be up here and all that. And Mr. Barnett passed on all this, and that's what you wound up with. And it was a very nice place.
Next picture, that was a beautiful studio. I bet you loved working in that studio.
Oh, it was. This is the thing that I liked. As a matter of fact, I had a little more to do with it than the other stuff, because this is what the motion picture companies had to worry about or fix. And they had to have overhead lighting. They had bridges across the ceiling. You know, you could walk on this bridge and turn the light on, big lights to give the right lighting or so on to make sure you had it. Well, our TV studios had to reduce that to smaller sizes and didn't have all that upper air bridging, you know, for lights and stuff, but they did it this way with hanging them, if you notice there.
So did you actually make suggestions on what should that studio be look like?
Well,
Hollywood experience?
Mr. Barnett asked us to give us our input, what we felt ought to be involved and how it ought to go, and if it could be done here. And he knew that I came out of California and that I'd been around the studios a little bit, and so that I had some ideas. And you know, they had flats and, you know, we set up flats in that studio there that made it look like it was a studio or a bedroom or a kitchen or something like that. And take it down, strike the set, put a different set up for the next movie, whatever we're going to do, commercial or whatever it was.
All right, it says your first broadcast was June 24, 1953. And it probably began with that test pattern. Do you remember anything like that?
What year, 53?
Uh-huh.
Well, and I guess I was right about that. I don't know, I remember this test pattern was on quite a long time. They were trying to make sure they got those scoops or whatever lined up with the antenna. So they
start with NBC tones at 5:45. John Cameron Swayze narrated the Camel News Cavalcade at 6. Then I Married Joan, starring Joan Davis and Jim Backus. Do you remember anything about that?
I remember Jim Backus was sort of a funny man.
I mean, do you remember that first broadcast?
Well, I got to say no. I don't remember what all happened there or what they put on the air. But we were on the air too long. They were in short supply until they got more people, more types of film. We had some kind of film. It wasn't film. It was something else that we used. And it was like film, but I can't recall what we called that.
I'm going to read you some names, and you've talked about some of them, but maybe we'll cover some you haven't. John Barnett, Paul McAvoy, Wilbur Shackelford, J.C. Porter, Ray Summersgill, R.D. Collins, and John Anderson, of course.
Yeah.
Were any of the pictures people there you couldn't recall their names? Did I give you their names?
I think that's right.
I mean, any of those names conjure up a story or something?
Well, Wilbur Shackelford was a former Oklahoma football player. Oklahoma, you know, put out some pretty good football players. And Wilbur is a nice looking, handsome man and a real pleasant fellow. And I remember that he was a guy you could talk to, and he talked to you. And he had a job with Mr. Barnett as landsman, I believe. You know, where they make sure that where you're drilling for oil may have some or may not, whichever the thing it bears out when they drill. And he did that job. And also he did a lot of office work for the studio.
Do you remember any spiels you used to do, like did you have something you said regularly, perhaps at the beginning of Cactus Jack or at anything? Can you give us, as if you're on the air, what you would say? Do one of your openings.
Oh, golly, I think I did it enough times I'd remember what I said. Well, I got right into it. I played the theme song, and then I got into today we have whatever it is we had. If we had a live audience or a live band or a live singer, I get right into it and go from there. That's all.
You don't remember any dialogue you used to do over and over and over?
Well, I used to have a guy come down from Rio Dosa. His name was Jerry Holzman. He played the part of Pinto Pete. And he'd come in and he'd talk like an I reckon, doggone it type guy. And he sort of give us a little humor to our programming, it was because he was funny.
Who was Clardy's clown?
How's that again?
Clardy's clown?
Well, that was Uncle Vitamin. That was me. Uncle Vitamin.
Can you do a little of that voice?
I spoke in my regular voice. And
some of the programs that use the characters, like the Saturday AM birthday party.
yes.
What about that Saturday morning show?
Yes. Oh, there was a lady who worked on that show too, and I can't think of her name. Her husband worked for the Coca-Cola company at the time, and I think she was a school teacher, but she was good at this sort of thing.
Who played Sheriff Norm?
Sheriff Norm was a guy named Norman. Norman was good with guns. He was a fast gun. He was able to pull that gun out and open fire in 0 seconds flat. And he entertained the kids with his horse. And he'd take them out to the bottomless lakes and show them, give them a ride on his horse and stuff like that. And of course, the kids around here are country kids, and they all knew horses anyway, but they enjoyed Sheriff Norm. And he had a truck, well, not a truck, it was sort of a sedan with his big sheriff's insignia on the sides, so people knew Sheriff Norm was there. And he was an entertainer. He was very good entertainer, and he could sing.
What was were you there on the last day of broadcasting for the TV station?
I think I was there, but I don't recall what all happened there. All I know is
There was a newscast, then Johnny Carson, and sign-off. This, according to a guy named Brig Knight, who was the TV director at the time.
What was his name?
Brig Knight, K-N-I-G-H-T.
That's probably the ones I didn't recall the name of.
Okay. Would you look at the camera and send a message to the Facebook users that want to see this interview for you? In other words, just look at the camera and talk to the people that have asked me to come get this interview with you. We want to know about you, about your life, about Pearl Harbor, about KSWS and your career as Cactus Jack. Would you talk to them and just say you're honored that they're interested, to keep it alive, to anything you feel like saying? Just look to the camera and talk to the Facebook.
Well, to those of you who requested or asked for me to be interviewed, I want to thank you for your interest and your stick-to-itiveness through the years. It's been a long run, and I had it from start to finish. But I tried to do the best I could to inform you and to entertain you and to be friends to the people of this valley and a protector of our people in the United States. And thank you for your efforts on my behalf. Thank you.
Very nice. Can you say anything as Cactus Jack?
I have to say that Cactus Jack was a name that people thought I didn't like. I wanted to give my own name because when I did the weather, I was John Anderson. When I did Sagebrush Serenade and the Western shows, I was Cactus Jack. And they thought perhaps I didn't want to be called that, but I didn't mind that at all. That was fine because it was recognition. And people did enjoy what I did. And I want to thank them for remembering me.
Who came up with the name Cactus Jack?
Oh, well, I think I did, really. It came up because when I left the West Coast, I'd been called that by several other people out there. And it just stuck with me. I don't know why it stuck in my mind. Anyway, when I got here and I had the chance to do this, the Cactus Jack was a name we expected, and they enjoyed, and it fitted me perfectly.
What made them call you Cactus Jack?
Well, they heard me say it. This is Cactus Jack.
Okay. Okay, anything that I thought to ask you that you would like to say?
Well, I hope that the Barnett family and the Collins particularly are happy with what we're doing here today, because they were always decent to me, and Mr. Collins was particularly decent to me because he took an old rusty shotgun of mine, a Winchester, and he took it and made it perfect, blued it for me. He was very interested in guns. He knew how to fix guns. And that much he did for me, and I appreciate that all the way. Thank you, Mr. Collins.
Anything else you want to say?
I'll have to close it out here. We're going to run out of time.
All right. You know what? Just look at Larry for a minute. Larry, talk to him so that he's just listening. I just need 10 or 15 seconds of you listening, that's all. So just look at Larry. Larry, you talk to him.
John, I really do appreciate you taking the time to tell us all about your story. I've loved hearing it when I was out of Reno. Still, it's new every time. And so it's wonderful. And I really appreciate your service. And